September 12th, 1988. We go to Sun Devil Stadium for this Monday Night Football and NFC East matchup between the Phoenix Cardinals and the Dallas Cowboys. Yes, there was a time where a team in Tempe was playing in the NFC East, while teams from Atlanta and New Orleans were playing in the NFC West. And yes, it makes as much sense today as it did back then. This is a huge game for a few reasons. Number one, both Phoenix and Dallas lost their opening game. Especially in the 1980s when only 5 teams in each conference made the postseason, instead of the 6-team format that we had afterwards, starting 0-2 is not good. But perhaps most importantly, number 2, this was the first game ever played in Arizona. The Cardinals played in St. Louis up until the 1987 season, when owner Bill Bidwell, upset with his stadium and lack of attendance, moved the team to Arizona, where they would become the Phoenix Cardinals. Even though they played in Tempe. Again, this makes about as much sense today as it did back then. Over 67,000 people showed up for this game, which still wasn't a sellout, but for the first time ever, the NFL was in Arizona. At 5:00 p.m. that night in Tempe, fans were buzzing. At long last, they finally had a team. By about 6:30, fans were booing and scratching their heads. And the reason why? Hang on a sec. Let's back up just a bit before I roll the footage. Dallas got on the board first with a Luis Sendejas 47-yard field goal in the first quarter. Fun fact, the first NFL points ever scored at Sun Devil Stadium were scored by a kicker who went to Arizona State. Forks up. The teams traded touchdowns in the second quarter, with Neil Lomax throwing a 16-yard touchdown pass for the Cardinals, and Herschel Walker punching it in from 3 yards out for the Cowboys. At this point, the score is 10-7 in favor of Dallas. Following a punt, Phoenix gets the ball back on their own 40-yard line with 36 seconds left. They try to get into field goal range, and they do so successfully after a throw to Ernie Jones. Phoenix is now on the Dallas 25-yard line with 3 seconds left and a chance to tie the game. Last play of the half. Del Greco from 42 yards out. Should be able to make this. Let's see what he's got.
Timeout. They move within Del Greco's range. They'll spot it now at the 32-yard line. It'll be a 42-yard attempt. South to hold. And they fake it. And Del Greco inside the 20, out of bounds at the 16. What?
What is that?
I don't have a clue.
Now, wait a minute. Is this a design play? It looked like a design play. I can't believe this.
It's amazing. If you're a field goal kicker, if you can't give him a shot from 42, why is he on the team?
Well, you might as well just release the guy if you don't have confidence. A design play all the way. Stout flips it to Del Greco. Joe Bostic out in front, but, I mean, you're counting on that play having to go 35 yards to the goal line. Because only 3 seconds, you're not going to get another play. That's nuts.
They did it so beautifully. They set it up absolutely perfectly, and I don't understand that at all.
Oh, I'm afraid that's where the players go to the locker room looking over their shoulders and saying, who the heck called that play?
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
that livened things up. That's the end of the half. Very much a design play. Perfect snap. It's only a 42-yard kick to tie the game and a little flip.
I'll tell you what, Phoenix, the Cardinals are in town.
Welcome to Dumb Decisions. Now before I break this play down, this whole series is about taking an in-depth look at decisions made during games that were clearly awful from the start. This isn't something that looked bad in hindsight. Rather, this is something that looked awful almost immediately. These are moves where your gut instinct tells you right away that there is no way this can possibly work. And sure enough, your gut instinct was smarter than that of an NFL head coach. And for this one, we're taking a look at the mind of Gene Stallings. Not a good head coach at the pro level we're talking about here. In his 4 seasons with the Cardinals, he had a losing record all 4 years. College is an entirely different story, but in the pros, not so much. Although in fairness to him, Larry Wilson was a horrible GM who somehow lasted 14 seasons with the Cardinals despite not winning a single playoff game and making it to the postseason just once, which came during the strike-shortened 1982 campaign. But I digress. So with that being said, let's take a look at why calling a fake field goal from the 25-yard line with 3 seconds left is not a good idea. This should come as no surprise to you, but kickers are slow. They are routinely the slowest players on a football field. I have no idea what Adam Vinatieri's 40-yard dash time is at this point, but at the age of 46, it can't be pretty. The odds of getting 25 yards on any play are low, but the odds of a kicker getting 25 yards on a run are almost impossible. So I decided to take a deeper dive into this. I wanted to see the longest run by a pure kicker in NFL history. Keep in mind that the data for this was kind of hard to find at first, because in the pre-merger era, he had players acting as kickers who also played skill positions. Those don't count. I wanted to see the longest run by a kicker. No skill players acting as kickers, no punters since it's a lot easier to gain yards on a fake punt since everyone's running the wrong way, no botched plays where the field goal gets blocked, just kickers running on a traditional fake field goal. And across the entire 100-year history of the NFL, I found it. The longest run by a pure kicker in NFL history. Comes from a 1998 game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Tennessee Oilers. Yes, saying Tennessee Oilers feels incredibly weird and unnatural. This game was on Sunday Night Football for the whole world to see. It's pretty much identical to the one that the Cardinals ran that I'm breaking down right now. It completely fooled the Tennessee defense. Kicker Michael Husted even had some legs on him to an extent. And this run gained 20 yards. Now, why am I not bashing that play, but I'm bashing this one? Is it because one worked and one didn't? No. Remember, the whole point of this series is plays that were clearly awful from the start. The play that Tampa Bay ran in 1998 was fine, because at the time of the snap, there were 14 seconds left on the clock. Unless this play was horribly botched, Tampa Bay would still have time to run a play. For this play in Phoenix, there were 3 seconds left on the clock. Barring a penalty, this was going to be the final play of the half. The only way for this play to work was if Phoenix scored a touchdown. They did this on the 25-yard line. The NFL record across all 100 years for longest run by a pure kicker is 20 yards. So instead of trying the field goal, Phoenix was banking on breaking an NFL record by 25%. For some perspective on what it means to beat a record by 25%, remember the Sebastian Janikowski 76-yard field goal attempt? At the time, the record for the longest field goal was 63 yards. Janikowski making that kick would have beaten the record by 20%. A 25% equivalent would have been if Janikowski tried a field goal from 79 yards. Records are meant to be broken. This game is meant to evolve. I'm not going to criticize teams simply for trying to break NFL records. But something like this is clearly ridiculous. And if you think we're done, oh no, not even close. Because remember, that 20-yard run by Tampa Bay kicker Michael Husted was from 1998. This game between the Cardinals and the Cowboys took place 10 years prior in 1988, which means that at the time, the record for the longest run by a pure kicker in a game was less than that. Before this game, the record was a mere 14 yards, and that was on an admittedly beautiful option play. That didn't involve the kicker having to outrun everyone. That involved the holder running with the ball, luring the defense in, and then pitching it to the kicker with nobody ahead of him. So for this play in Phoenix to have worked, they would have needed to almost double the record for longest run by a kicker at the time. And yet, somehow, it gets worse. Because up until that point in NFL history, Atkinson's 14-yard run in the Giants-Bengals game was the only run by a pure kicker in NFL history that went for longer than 10 yards. Just to recap, instead of trying for a 42-yard field goal, the Cardinals opted to call a play that had only gained more than 10 yards once in the near 70-year history of the league at that point, and they had to gain 25 yards when the record was 14. It's one of those plays that looks dumb at first, and then the more you think about it, the dumber it looks. But whatever, it's only 3 points. It's not like those 3 points would come back to matter anyway. Are you kidding me? Naturally, this decision got questioned after the game, and to his credit, Gene Stallings faced the music. He said that Del Greco didn't look good in warm-ups and he had missed earlier in the game, and they weren't sure whether or not he could make it, so they opted to call the fake. But with the benefit of hindsight, he admitted to his mistake with an admittedly amazing quote. He said, "Looking back, I wish I had kicked it. It doesn't take a Phi Beta Kappa to figure that out." Still, if you don't think your kicker can make it, why not try a Hail Mary? Why not try a low probability play that actually has worked before instead of trying a no probability play? The whole logic made no sense at the time, and more than 30 years later, I'm still not quite sure what Stallings thought was going to happen on this play. But I can assure you that it doesn't take a Phi Beta Kappa to figure it out. A drunken Sigma Nu member in the middle of his 7th beer pong game of the night would still be able to tell you that this wasn't going to work out. And sure enough, it didn't. So what did we learn from all of this? Calling a play that would have broken the record if successful is gutsy. But to call a play that would have shattered the record is kinda stupid if the only successful outcome is a touchdown. There's a reason that kickers don't pick up tons of yards running the ball. With 3 seconds left at the 25-yard line, it's probably best to opt for a relatively routine field goal instead of trying a play that has literally never worked. And Phi Beta Kappas are not the only ones who can realize when a play is destined to fail. Because when all these elements are in play, you can't exactly be surprised when this play backfires. Talk about a dumb decision.
Timeout. They move within Del Greco's range. They'll spot it now at the 32-yard line. It'll be a 42-yard attempt. South to hold. And they fake it. And Del Greco inside the 20, out of bounds at the 16. What?
What is that?
I don't have a clue.
Now, wait a minute. Is this a design play? It looked like a design play. I can't believe this.
It's amazing. If you're a field goal kicker, if you can't give him a shot from 42, why is he on the team?
Well, you might as well just release the guy if you don't have confidence. A design play all the way. Stout flips it to Del Greco. Joe Bostic out in front, but, I mean, you're counting on that play having to go 35 yards to the goal line. Because only 3 seconds, you're not going to get another play. That's nuts.
They did it so beautifully. They set it up absolutely perfectly, and I don't understand that at all.
Oh, I'm afraid that's where the players go to the locker room looking over their shoulders and saying, who the heck called that play?
Yeah. Well, that
Wow.
livened things up. That's the end of the half. Very much a design play. Perfect snap. It's only a 42-yard kick to tie the game and a little flip.
I'll tell you what, Phoenix, the Cardinals are in town.